In 1472, the sailing ships of the Portuguese explorer Fernando Po dropped their anchors in the estuary of the Wauri River in the Gulf of Guinea, where equatorial and tropical Africa meet, today the site of the city of Douala. The dark waters of the river teem with brightly colored crustaceans, inspiring the name to the navigator Po, Rio dos Camaraos, River of Shrimps. After several transformations, this Portuguese term will become Cameroon, the name of this African nation which forms a triangle between Guinea, Gabon, Congo, Nigeria, Chad, and the Central African Republic. Cameroon has one of the most varied landscapes in Africa. Open plains lead to plateaus and mountains, desert zones to vast stretches of impenetrable forest. Right in the heart of one such forest, in the western part of the country, lives the Bangwa tribe, whose story, guided by Providence, has become closely linked with that of the Focolare movement. The Bangwa are a people with an ancient civilization, a people who, far from the harmful influence of Western colonization, has been able to conserve the richness of the purest African values: respect for life, hospitality, solidarity, wisdom, and kindness that springs from a true spirit of brotherhood. They are a people with a strong sense of community, and this collective dimension is predominant in all levels of their social organization. Each of the tribe's villages is governed by a chief, the head of the village, who, together with the other chiefs, collaborates with the Fon, or king, in governing the whole tribe. The organization of the fundamental nucleus of the Bangwa tribe, the family, encourages collaboration among its members. Everyone, from the eldest to the youngest, has their own place and responsibilities in managing the life of the family, according to his or her experience and abilities. The very structure of the compound, the typical Cameroonian family home, with 3 buildings facing a common courtyard, reflects and encourages a spirit of sharing. Children growing up in an environment like this are naturally accustomed from a tender age to living as part of a social group. It's striking to see their sense of freedom and joy of living. Is this, therefore, a corner of the world without problems? Until 30 years ago, unfortunately, the serene existence of the Bangwa people was overshadowed by a terrible threat. Scenes like this one, in which mothers perform a traditional dance to express their grief for the death of their children, were all too common. Diseases of all kinds, but above all malaria and sleeping sickness, were decimating the population. The infant mortality rate had reached 90%. The Bangwa people couldn't stand idle in the face of such disaster.
In
those terrible years when so many babies were dying, we tried to treat them with traditional medicine, but we could not cure them. We then went into the sacred forest to pray and implored God to help us, but this didn't solve the problem either. So the Fon, our king, asked the Christians among our tribe to pray to their God for help. The Fon himself went to ask their bishop for help for his dying people.
So we arrived in Fontem one evening in February 1966, and our first home was this one here. The catechist who lives nearby brought us inside. All I can say is that luckily enough it was dark when we got here, so we couldn't see anything. We found some kind of makeshift beds made of bamboo sticks, I think, and we were so tired we promptly fell fast asleep. In spite of the external difficulties and in spite of the long distance from any town, in spite of all this, each of us felt very, very happy, which came, I think, from the fact that we were beginning a new adventure with Jesus in our midst here in Africa.
Cominciavamo veramente la nostra avventura con Gesù in mezzo in Africa.
We felt such joy, such fullness.
Questa pienezza.
Back in 1963, at the invitation of the local bishop, Julius Peters, some Focolarini had already gone to work in 3 different districts in the northwest part of Cameroon, where they supported existing missionary activities. So Bishop Peters asked the Focolarini to move to the village of Fontem to answer the Bangwa tribe's request for help. First, 3 men Focolarini, 2 doctors and a technician came to Fontem, followed later by 2 women Focolarine nurses.
We danced for joy because they had come to help us and save us from disease and death. We danced all night long. They arrived late in the evening, and the next morning they were already at work. They wasted no time in getting started. First in Forju's house, and they continued to this day.
We immediately began to look after the sick, and they kept arriving, day and night. We were so happy. In fact, we'd made a pact together to love one another completely, because what we wanted to give was Jesus present among us.
People needing medical attention came in large numbers, and the hut, which served as a dispensary, soon reached its bursting point. The critical health crisis meant there was no time to be lost in the construction of a hospital, but without the means and without the materials, it was an immense challenge.
Ma la popolazione ha subito collaborato.
But the people got involved right away. They came with us to cut down trees, they gathered stones, they brought sand from the river, and in just a few months' time we'd already laid the foundations for the first wing of the hospital.
Blocco dell'ospedale.
Chiara visited Fontem for the first time, and all the people, led by the Fon and his chiefs, came to meet her and to celebrate her arrival. In a wide clearing in front of the royal palace, the different villagers welcomed Chiara with heartfelt speeches and beautiful dances. It was truly a special moment. Chiara sensed a real presence of God, like a sun which embraces all those present and gathers them in unity.
I had this intuition. It was as if God was embracing everyone, all together. We Focolarini who were present and this entire tribe. In fact, it was there that the idea first came to me that we as a movement would have something to do with those of other religions. There, in that moment, it seemed to me that God was in some way blessing the initiative that was coming to life. And in the meantime, He was blessing the Bangwa people and all of us, together with them.
There was a deep meeting of minds with Fontem I, who, in virtue of his profound union with God, immediately recognized divine intervention in the events of those days. He perceived that God loved them and had responded to his people's call for help through the Focolarini. His wise gaze, almost like that of an Old Testament patriarch, reached far beyond. Chiara, he loved to repeat, was sent here on earth by God to tell us something that he wants to explain to the world today.
I had a wonderful relationship with Fontem I. Once he invited me to the royal palace and asked me, "You are a woman, and therefore you are worth nothing. How were you able to start this movement?" I answered, "Exactly because I am a woman, because I am worth nothing, it is clear that someone else intervened. And since the movement is so widespread, that someone could only be God. It couldn't be a man or woman." The Fon understood and remained close to us throughout the years.
The collaboration between the Bangwa people and the Focolarini, based on this solid foundation of mutual esteem, continues to deepen and grow. Together they're involved not only in solving the pressing health and social problems, but also in a plan to make this corner of Cameroon, immersed in the bush, an oasis of peace and brotherhood. It was during her first visit to Fontem that Chiara, getting to know this naturally Christian people more closely, became convinced that this was the right place for a little town of Mary, an African Mariapolis. Soon other Focolarini came, teachers, technicians, construction workers. At first, they worked above all to complete the hospital, to be able to meet the urgent medical needs more efficiently. Thanks to this, and to the selfless efforts of the doctors and nurses, there were incredible results. 10,000 people were treated in 1966, 20,000 in 1967, 30,000 in 1968, and the infant mortality rate was drastically reduced.
The first Focolarini doctors who came to Fontem found a dramatic situation in that there was an extremely high infant mortality rate. Work was started immediately, focusing on the main culprit, which was the sleeping sickness. 3 strategies were being employed. First, by identifying and isolating the foci of infection. And second of all, by reducing the proliferation of the tsetse fly, which is the vector of this particular illness, by using special fly traps. And third of all, by developing an effective cure. In fact, doctors working in this hospital were able to develop a treatment protocol which is now employed all over the world with minimal side effects. And actually they were able to reduce the infant mortality rate to less than 1%.
Today, the hospital is a very efficient structure, capable of meeting the health needs not only of the Bangwa people. Oftentimes, solidarity makes up for transportation difficulties. Even today, it's not rare to see the sick being carried by others from distant villages after walking for hours.
Today, the hospital has a capacity of 120 beds, with a staff of 80. We have medical wards for men and women, plus pediatrics, maternity, surgical, optical, and cardiological wards. There are also various laboratories at the service of the different departments.
Over the years, the hospital has continued to develop, increasing the available number of beds and equipping itself with better and more modern facilities. What's remained unchanged is the relationship with the patients. Just as in the early days of the hut dispensary, the sick person is not considered as a clinical case only, but as a person to be loved.
I think that the specific characteristic of this hospital is its global approach towards the patient. And this means not only to focus on the illness itself, but to get interested in the patient, perhaps to get to know their family situation, their home environment, their difficulties. So as well as building a personal relationship with the patient, we health professionals also try to work well as a team, examining the illness and finding the right treatment together.
At the same time the hospital was being